I was traveling last summer, and not just with the travel, but I've noticed that a lot of people don't even know what mental health is, right? Like they're not familiar with the term, the concept, the thing.
Hmm.
And that's alarming in its own ways. But what would you say to someone who just doesn't have that in their vocabulary? Like where do you start? How,
Uh,
it's almost like teaching someone that's coming from a different planet, right? Like
mhm.
it should be such a part of everyone's life. So if you haven't even heard mental health, those words, like where do you start with that?
It's so different depending on the person that you're speaking to,
Yeah.
and where they're coming from and what their context is. I think mental health, the term mental health, I think is foreign to a lot of people, and don't necessarily know exactly what it is. And
Yeah.
I've heard different definitions and that sort of thing. I think Jack.org explains it well, and that we all have mental health, and mental health is essentially just functioning at your, I guess, optimum
Yeah.
functionality. I
Yeah.
guess
Yeah.
I don't even. There you go. I'm like working in it every day, and I'm not quite sure how to describe mental health. Um, I wouldn't know necessarily where to start, but what I can say is I think that people that aren't being introduced to the idea of mental health and what it is and the understanding that we all have it are going to be harder on themselves and going to not understand themselves as best as you would hope if they did understand what mental health was.
Right.
Because whether or not we all will struggle with our mental health at some point in our lives. We'll go through whatever it is we go through that we're working through, and some of that will be significantly worse than others and more acute and really need help. And sometimes it's just the regular ups and downs of life. If you don't understand mental health, you aren't able to give yourself a break. I respond to things in a way that I really don't like sometimes. Sometimes a little more angry than I should be. Sometimes a little more distant. Sometimes I'm really quiet, and I want to challenge myself to be less like socially awkward in that moment. And if I didn't have an understanding that like when I'm not myself or when I'm angry in a way that I wish I wasn't angry, I could be really hard on myself, which is just not going to make things better. Or I could try to understand it. And I think that piece of like, or I could try to understand it, is understanding what mental health is.
Right.
And when I'm trying to better understand myself, what I'm trying to understand is what the hell's going on in my brain that's making me react like this. Can I try to start figuring that out so I can take away whatever those external forces are that are making me react in a certain way? And so one, I think I would start with that. I would start with like, you need to understand yourself better. And if you think about it in that way, everyone has a way they react in which they're not in control.
Right.
And if I think you can use that to explain, like, that's your head at work. And if that's your head at work, that's your mental health at work.
Yeah.
If you could better understand. And then the flip side is that is you can have much better relationships and give people around you more empathy, more support, but also have vulnerable conversations about yourselves that you wouldn't otherwise be able to have. So it's more so what you're missing out on by not understanding what it is.
Yeah. That's very well said. I think one of the key points you mentioned there is giving yourself a break, right? Like in just like a year and a half almost of working at Jack, you're just part of a more accepting way of thinking every day, I find, working there.